2 hours before the Keth ships would break through the last defense shields, Dr. Hannah made the most important discovery in human history. She found that the dimensional energy was not just power floating in empty space, it was actually connected to the fabric of reality itself, like invisible threads holding the universe together. The alien technology had been tapping into something that existed beyond normal space and time. The Keth had discovered this incredible force thousands of years ago, but they had always been too afraid to use more than a tiny fraction of its true power. Their entire civilization was built on careful, controlled use of dimensional energy. Lieutenant Woojin helped Dr. Hannah carry the prototype device through the corridors of the shaking space station. The metal sphere felt warm in their hands and seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. The patterns on its surface moved and shifted like living things trying to escape from their metal prison. The device looked simple enough to hold in two hands, but the energy readings from Hannah's instruments were beyond anything they had ever measured before. The power flowing through the small sphere was equivalent to the energy output of multiple stars all focused into one controllable weapon. "Are you sure about this?" Captain Jisu asked when Dr. Hannah explained her plan to the bridge crew. "You're talking about turning our defense station into a weapon that could destroy entire solar systems. What if something goes wrong? What if we accidentally blow up Earth instead of saving it?" Dr. Hannah understood the fear in Captain Jisu's voice. The responsibility was enormous, and the risks were beyond calculation. One small mistake could tear a hole in space-time itself, and destroy not just Earth but possibly other star systems as well. But doing nothing meant certain death for everyone. The Keth call their biggest warships world breakers because they can crack planets in half, Hannah explained as alarms continued to sound throughout the station. But this device could do something the Keth never imagined. It could reach across vast distances of space and affect entire fleets at once. The prototype had to be connected directly to the station's main power core, which meant if it exploded, everyone would die instantly. But if they did nothing, the Keth would kill them all anyway. The choice was between a quick death and a slow one. Sergeant Kyung worked with steady hands to install the device, even though the station was shaking from constant Keth bombardment. Her job was to connect the alien technology to human systems without causing a catastrophic explosion that would vaporize the entire station. The installation process was terrifying because nobody really understood how the dimensional energy worked. The Keth had built their technology over thousands of years through careful experimentation, but humans were trying to master it in a few hours. As the device powered up, strange things began happening. Throughout the space station, gravity started acting weird in some sections, making people float unexpectedly. In other areas, time seemed to move slightly slower so that conversations sounded stretched and distorted. Technician Sunwoo monitored the energy levels from the control room and watched the readings climb higher and higher. "Energy levels are beyond our ability to measure," he reported to the bridge. "The instruments are showing power equivalent to several stars all flowing through our small device." The dimensional energy was bleeding into normal space around the station and changing the fundamental rules of physics in small but noticeable ways. Metal objects became slightly transparent, glass turned different colors, and some of the electronic equipment started working in impossible ways. Commander Minho felt sick to his stomach as he watched the reality distortions spread through their station. "What have we done?" he whispered. "We are playing with forces that could unravel the entire universe. This is not just dangerous, it is completely insane." But Dr. Hannah was fascinated by what she was seeing. The dimensional energy was not destroying things, it was revealing the hidden connections that existed between all matter and energy in the universe. Everything was connected in ways that normal science could not detect. The Keth fleet outside had no idea what was happening on the human station. Their sensors were designed to detect normal energy sources like nuclear reactors or fusion engines, but dimensional energy existed partially outside of regular space, so their instruments could not see it properly. Fleet Commander Vorthak studied the human station through his ship's viewing screen and saw only a small dying outpost that would surrender within the hour. His tactical computers showed that the humans had almost no energy left, and their weapons were nearly silent. The Keth had fought hundreds of wars against primitive species, and the pattern was always the same. The inferior races would fight desperately for a while, then realize They could not win and finally surrender or die. The humans seemed to be following the same predictable path. But inside the human station, something unprecedented was happening. Dr. Hannah had successfully connected her prototype device to the station's power core, and the dimensional energy was flowing smoothly through the alien technology without causing an explosion. The power levels continued to climb until they reached a point where the station's instruments could no longer measure them accurately. The energy flowing through the small metal sphere was now greater than the total output of Earth-Sun, but somehow the device remained stable and controllable. Lieutenant Wujin watched the energy readings with amazement and terror. "How is this possible?" he asked Dr. Hannah. "We are channeling the power of multiple stars through a device the size of a basketball. Why has it not exploded and killed us all?" "Because dimensional energy does not follow the same rules as normal physics," Hannah explained. "The power exists partially outside of our reality, so it can be compressed and focused in ways that should be impossible. The Keth discovered this long ago, but they were too afraid to use it properly." Captain Jisoo felt the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders like a mountain. The device was ready and the Keth ships were almost within final attack range. In a few minutes she would have to decide whether to use this reality warping weapon or watch Earth die. The prototype had exceeded all expectations and was drawing enormous amounts of dimensional energy without any signs of instability. But nobody knew what would happen when they actually fired it at an enemy target. The weapon might work perfectly, or it might tear a hole in space-time outside the space station. The Keth fleet moved into their final attack formation. Their commanders were confident that these primitive humans would be defeated. Within the hour, they had conquered hundreds of worlds using the same tactics and overwhelming technological superiority. Fleet Commander Vorthok opened a communication channel to the human station and prepared to offer them one final chance to surrender. The humans had fought bravely, but now it was time for them to accept the inevitable and submit to the Keth Empire. But he did not know that Dr. Hannah had just activated something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The small metal sphere in the station's reactor room was now connected to forces that existed beyond normal reality, and Captain Jisoo was about to use them. The dimensional energy pulsed through the alien technology like blood through veins, and the patterns on the device's surface glowed with increasing brightness. The breakthrough was complete, and humanity was about to discover what it meant to wield the power of gods. The Keth Empire was about to learn that some species become most dangerous when they have nothing left to lose. Captain Jisoo looked out at the dark space around Earth and felt her heart sink. The enemy ships were everywhere like angry metal wasps buzzing around a dying flower. 300 massive vessels from the Keth Empire had surrounded the last human defense station, and they were getting closer every minute. The viewing screen showed the terrible truth that everyone on the station already knew. Earth was going to die today. The blue and green planet that had been home to billions of people was now defended by just one small military station and a handful of desperate soldiers who refused to give up. Commander Minho ran onto the bridge, and his uniform was torn and dirty from the latest fight. His face was covered in sweat, and his eyes showed the same fear that everyone felt. The defense computers were flashing red warnings, and the sound of alarms filled the air like screaming birds. "We have maybe 6 hours before they break through our shields," Minho said to Captain Jisoo as he tried to catch his breath. "The weapons are overheating, and we lost 2 more gun turrets in the last attack. Our energy reserves are down to 30% and falling fast." Captain Jisoo nodded but did not speak. She had been fighting the Keth Empire for 5 long years and had watched them destroy every human colony one by one. The aliens were too strong and too smart, and their technology was far better than anything humans had ever built. Down in the lower levels of the space station, Dr. Hannah was working in her small laboratory. Her hands moved quickly over the alien technology she had been studying for months. The captured Keth equipment was strange and beautiful, but also very dangerous to touch. The metal was warm even though it had no power source, and sometimes it seemed to glow with its own light. The patterns carved into the surface hurt her eyes when she looked at them for too long, but she had learned to read some of the alien symbols. Hannah had discovered something amazing about the Keth weapons, but she was not sure if anyone would believe her. The aliens called their power source dimensional folding, which sounded like magic but was actually advanced science that humans barely understood. Her assistant Dong-Yun was helping her measure the energy readings from a broken Keth weapon. The numbers on their instruments were so high that they had to check them 3 times to make sure the machines were working correctly. These readings do not make sense, Hannah said. As she stared at the data, the Keth are pulling enormous amounts of power from somewhere, but they are only using a tiny fraction of what is available. It is like using the power of a star to light a single candle. Dong-Yun looked over her shoulder at the glowing alien device. They have been using this technology for thousands of years, he said. Why would they not use all the power they can get? Maybe there is something dangerous about using too much. Hannah had been thinking the same thing. The Keth were careful and methodical in everything they did. Their ships were perfectly designed and their tactics were flawless. But what if their caution was also their weakness? What if they were afraid to use the full power of their own technology? She picked up another piece of Keth equipment and felt the strange warmth flowing through the metal. The energy was definitely coming from somewhere else, not from any power source she could see. The aliens had found a way to reach into another dimension and steal power from it outside the laboratory. The battle was getting worse. The Keth ships were firing their terrible weapons at the human station, and each blast made the whole structure shake like a leaf in a storm. The lights flickered and sometimes went out completely, leaving everyone in darkness. Captain Jisoo received reports from all over the station. The medical bay was full of wounded soldiers. The engine room was reporting critical damage to the main reactor, and the communications center had lost contact with Earth itself, which might mean the planet was already under attacking. Her laboratory, Dr. Hana, made a discovery that changed everything. She found that the dimensional energy the Keth were using was connected to something much bigger than just a power source. It was connected to the fabric of space and time itself. The energy readings showed that there was enough power available to destroy entire solar systems, or maybe even more, but the Keth technology had built-in safety limits that prevented anyone from accessing more than a small amount of this incredible force. What if we could remove those limits? Hannah whispered to herself. The idea was both exciting and terrifying. If humans could tap into the full power of dimensional energy, they might be able to fight back against the Keth Empire, but one mistake could tear a hole in reality itself. Dong-Yun heard her, and his face went pale. "You're talking about playing with forces that could destroy everything we know," he said. "The Keth have been using this technology for centuries, and they are still afraid to push it to its limits, but we are going to die anyway," Hannah replied as another explosion shook the station. "If we do nothing, the Keth will kill everyone on Earth and then move on to destroy other worlds. We have nothing left to lose." She began working on a new design using the Keth technology as a starting point, but removing all the safety systems that limited its power. The device would be simple, just a metal sphere that could channel dimensional energy without any restrictions. The work was dangerous because the alien technology fought back against any changes. Every time she tried to modify the Keth equipment, it would grow hot and start to vibrate, as if it was angry about being altered. Hours passed as Hana worked, and outside the battle continued. The Keth ships moved closer to Earth like a slowly tightening noose. The human defenders fought bravely, but everyone knew they were just delaying the inevitable. Finally, Hannah finished her prototype device. It looked innocent enough, just a smooth metal ball covered with patterns that seemed to shift and move when she was not looking directly at them, but the energy readings from her instruments went crazy whenever she turned it on. The device was connected to the same dimensional source that powered Keth technology, but without any of the safety limits. The power flowing through it was equivalent to several stars, all focused into one small sphere that could fit in her hands. She called Captain Jisoo on the communication system and tried to explain what she had discovered, but the words sounded impossible, even to her own ears. She was asking them to trust a weapon that could either save Earth or destroy it completely. Captain Jisoo listened to the explanation and felt a cold fear in her stomach. Dr. Hannah was talking about turning their defense station into something that could affect entire star systems. The responsibility was crushing, but what choice did they have? The Keth ships were only 2 hours away from breaking through the final defense shields. After that, they would destroy the station and then move on to Earth itself. Billions of people would die unless someone tried something desperate. Hannah carried her prototype to the main reactor room with help from Lieutenant Wujin. The device was heavier than it looked, and it made their hands tingle with strange energy. The patterns on its surface seemed to glow brighter as they got closer to the station power core. "This is our last chance," Hannah said as she prepared to install the device. "If this works, we might be able to fight back. If it does not work, we will all die, but at least we will die trying to save our world." The Keth Empire had conquered 100 worlds, and their commanders were confident that Earth would fall like all the others, but they had never faced a species desperate enough to gamble with the fundamental forces of reality itself. When Captain Jisoo placed her hand on the activation control for the first time, the entire universe seemed to hold its breath. The dimensional energy that Dr. Hana had tapped into was unlike anything humans had ever encountered before. It did not just travel through space like normal weapons, it actually folded space around itself. The targeting system showed a Keth cruiser on the edge of their attack formation. Commander Taeyun was operating the weapon controls, and his hands were shaking. As he lined up the first shot, nobody knew what would happen when they fired this reality warping device at an enemy target. The Keth ship they had chosen was massive and heavily armored with weapons that could destroy entire cities, but it was about to face something that existed partially outside of normal reality. The dimensional beam would not have to break through the ship's armor because it would simply ignore the laws of physics. "Fire," Captain Jisoo said in a voice that was barely above a whisper. The Galaxyrender device activated with a sound like reality tearing apart. The dimensional energy formed into a beam that did not travel across space in the normal way. Instead, it folded the distance between the weapon and its target so that the beam arrived instantly, regardless of how far away the enemy ship was. Commander Taeyun watched through the targeting scope as the beam reached out across thousands of kilometers of empty space and touched the alien warship. When the dimensional energy made contact with the Keth cruiser, the results were beyond anything they had imagined possible. The enemy vessel did not explode in a ball of fire and debris. Instead, it simply ceased to exist in normal space. The dimensional energy had torn the ship completely out of reality, leaving only empty vacuum where a massive warship had been floating just seconds before. "By the stars," whispered Navigator Jehun as he stared at the empty space where the Keth ship had been. "We did not destroy that vessel, we erased it from existence. How is such a thing even possible?" The other Keth ships in the formation scattered in panic as their sensors tried to understand what had just happened. Their instruments could detect the energy discharge from the human station but could not explain where one of their cruisers had gone. The ship had simply vanished without any explosion or debris field. Dr. Hana monitored the dimensional energy flow from her laboratory and saw that the device was stable, but each shot drained power from their connection to the dimensional source. They could not fire continuously like normal weapons, but each shot was devastatingly effective against any target. The Keth had never faced anything that could simply delete their ships from reality. Their technology was advanced and their armor was nearly impenetrable, but none of that mattered against a weapon that could reach into the fabric of space-time itself. Communications. Officer Boyang intercepted transmissions from the Keth fleet as they tried to communicate with each other about what they had witnessed. Their language was difficult to understand, but the panic in their voices was universal. They were using words that roughly translated to reality killer and dimension eater. For the first time in the 5-year war against humanity, the Keth Empire was experiencing genuine fear. Their ships had been destroyed before, but never in a way that completely violated their understanding of how the universe worked. The humans had somehow acquired technology that made the impossible seem routine. Fleet Commander Vorthik studied the sensor data from his flagship and felt something he had not experienced in centuries of warfare: uncertainty. His tactical computers could not explain what had happened to the lost cruiser, and his science officers were reporting readings that made no sense. The human station was generating energy signatures that should not exist according to Keth understanding of physics. The power levels were equivalent to multiple stars, but somehow contained within a small space station that should have been destroyed by such enormous forces. Captain Jisoo felt a grim satisfaction as she prepared to fire the Galaxyrender again. Humanity had been pushed to the very edge of extinction, but they had found a way to push back. The question now was whether they could master this incredible power before it destroyed them. All the second target was a Keth destroyer that was trying to flank the human station. Its captain had probably thought he was being clever by approaching from an unexpected angle, but the dimensional beam did not care about tactics or strategy. It simply erased whatever it touched. When the second Keth ship vanished from reality, the panic in the alien fleet became complete. Some ships began retreating without orders, while others fired wildly in all directions, trying to hit an enemy they could not understand. The disciplined Keth formation dissolved into chaos. Lieutenant Colonel Yuna monitored the battle from the tactical center and watched as the alien fleet tried to regroup. The Keth were excellent soldiers and their discipline was legendary, but they had never faced a weapon that could delete entire warships from existence. The dimensional energy readings from the Galaxyrender showed that the device was drawing power from somewhere beyond normal space. Time Dr. Hana had discovered that the energy source was practically unlimited, but accessing it required precise control to avoid tearing holes in reality. Engineer Changmin studied the captured Keth technology in the lower levels of the station and made a disturbing discovery. The aliens had built safety systems into all their dimensional weapons that prevented them from accessing more than a tiny fraction of available power. They are afraid of their own technology, he reported to Captain Jisoo. The Keth have been using dimensional energy for thousands of years, but they deliberately limit its power because they know how dangerous it can be. We just removed all those safety limits. The implications were staggering. The Keth Empire had been fighting with weapons that were deliberately weakened by their own built in restrictions. Humanity had taken the same technology and pushed it far beyond what its creators had ever dared to attempt. As the battle continued, the Keth ships adapted their tactics and began using hit-and-run attacks to avoid the devastating dimensional beam. They were fast learners, and their captains quickly realized that staying in one place for too long meant certain death. But Captain Jisoo had more surprises in store. Dr. Hana had discovered that by adjusting the dimensional frequency, she could affect different types of matter selectively instead of erasing entire ships. They could disable specific systems like engines or weapons. The third shot from the Galaxyrender targeted a Keth battleship, but instead of making it disappear, the dimensional energy selectively erased only the ship's weapon systems. The massive vessel suddenly found itself completely defenseless, floating helplessly in space like a giant metal whale. We can capture them alive. Captain Jisoo realized this changes everything. If we can disable their ships instead of destroying them, we can learn about their technology and maybe even take prisoner. The battle had lasted 6 hours, and the Keth fleet had lost nearly half their ships to the reality warping weapon. The survivors were retreating in disorder, their confidence shattered by encounters with technology that should not exist. But Captain Jisoo knew this was only the beginning. Earth had won one battle against the small Keth fleet, but the Empire controlled thousands of worlds and millions of ships. The Galaxyrender had given humanity a fighting chance, but the real war was just starting. News of the battle would spread through Keth communication networks, and soon every alien commander would know about the humans' reality warping weapon. The next attack would come with better preparation and probably much larger numbers. The dimensional energy had given humanity hope, but it had also painted a target on Earth that could be seen from across the galaxy. 3 weeks after the first battle, Captain Jisoo stood in the command center watching Earth slowly heal from 5 years of war. The planet still bore scars from Keth attacks, but for the first time since the invasion began, there was hope burning in human hearts across the world. Dr. Hana had used every moment of those 3 weeks to build more Galaxyrender devices, working with teams of scientists and engineers who barely understood the technology they were assembling. The dimensional energy was complex and dangerous, but humanity was learning to master it through desperation and determination. We now have 4 operational Galaxyrender platforms, Hana reported to the War Council. The devices are installed on hidden stations throughout the solar system, giving us coverage from multiple angles. The Keth will not be able to approach Earth without facing our reality warping weapons. Major Sung-hoon studied the defensive arrangements on his tactical display. The new weapons were positioned near Mars Luna and the asteroid belt, creating a defensive network that could protect Earth from attacks coming from any direction. Each Galaxyrender could erase entire fleets from existence. Intelligence reports suggested that the Keth Empire was preparing a massive counterattack using their most feared military formation. The Doom Wall was commanded by Fleet Admiral Vorthak himself and contained over 1,000 warships, including the Empire's largest and most powerful vessel's lieutenant. Colonel Yuna had spent weeks interrogating captured Keth prisoners and learning about their military structure. The aliens were terrified of the dimensional weapons, but their empire was too proud to accept defeat from what they considered a primitive species. "They are calling us the reality killers," she reported to Captain Jisoo. The name has spread throughout their entire communication network. "Every Keth commander now knows about our weapons, and they are developing new tactics to counter them." The captured Keth officers had revealed something important about their own technology. Their dimensional weapons were deliberately limited by safety systems that prevented catastrophic accidents but also reduced their effectiveness. The Keth had chosen safety over power. Engineer Chang Min had reverse-engineered several pieces of captured alien equipment and discovered that Keth civilization was built on fear of their own technology. They had experienced disasters in their distant past that made them extremely cautious about using dimensional energy. Specialist Yunji monitored long-range sensors and detected the approach of the largest Keth fleet ever assembled. The Doom Wall contained ships from across the Empire, including vessel types that humans had never seen before. Some of the alien battleships were larger than Earth cities. "They are not taking any chances this time," Commander Minho observed as he studied the enemy formation. "This fleet could probably conquer most star systems. Just through sheer numbers, they are bringing everything they have to destroy us, Captain." Jisoo felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a mountain. The survival of humanity depended on their ability to use dimensional weapons against an enemy that was now prepared for them. The next battle would determine the fate of Earth. Darhana had made another breakthrough in understanding dimensional energy. She discovered that the alien defensive shields created instability in local space-time that could be exploited by the Galaxyrender weapons. If they could overload the Keth shields, the feedback might destroy multiple ships at once. The plan was incredibly dangerous. Instead of targeting individual vessels, they would fire all 4 Galaxyrender devices simultaneously at the center of the enemy formation. The combined dimensional energy would create a cascade effect that could consume the entire Keth fleet, but the energy requirements for such an attack would drain their connection to the dimensional source for days afterward. If the plan failed, they would be defenseless against any surviving enemy ships. The gamble was enormous, but the potential payoff was worth the risk. Technician Sunwoo worked around the clock to synchronize the 4 Galaxyrender devices so they could fire as one weapon. The dimensional energy had to be precisely coordinated, or the weapons might interfere with each other and cause unpredictable results. The Keth fleet approached the solar system slowly and carefully. Their commanders, having learned respect for human dimensional weapons, Fleet Admiral Vorthak deployed his ships in a defensive formation designed to minimize casualties from reality warping attacks, but he did not know that Dr. Hana had been studying Keth defensive tactics and had found a weakness in their strategy. The aliens relied on their shields to protect them from dimensional energy, but those same shields could be turned into weapons against them. Navigator Ji-hoon tracked the enemy fleet as it moved past the outer planets. The Keth ships were using their own dimensional technology to create protective barriers around each vessel, making them harder to target with normal weapons, but also creating vulnerabilities. The dimensional shields work by bending space around each ship, Hannah explained to the bridge crew. But when multiple shields operate in close proximity, they interfere with each other. If we can create a resonance cascade, the shields will collapse and take the ships with them. Communications, Officer Boyang intercepted Keth transmissions as Fleet Admiral Vorthak prepared his forces for the final assault on Earth. The alien commander was confident that his overwhelming numbers would defeat the human dimensional weapons through sheer persistence. Captain Jisoo watched the enemy fleet deploy into attack formation and felt her heart racing. The moment of truth was approaching, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The Galaxyrender Weapons were charged and ready, but success depended on perfect timing. The Keth ships began their approach toward Earth, moving in waves designed to overwhelm the human defenses through coordinated attacks. Their weapons were already charging, and their shields were at maximum power. The alien formation looked invincible, but appearances could be deceiving. Dr. Hannah had calculated that the enemy shields would create exactly the right conditions for a dimensional cascade if they could trigger it at precisely the right moment. The Keth had unknowingly created their own vulnerability. All Galaxyrender stations report ready for coordinated firing specialist. Yunji announced from the Weapons Control Center the dimensional energy levels are synchronized and the targeting computers have locked onto the center of the enemy formation. Captain Jisu took a deep breath and prepared to give the order that would either save Earth or doom it to destruction. The four-dimensional weapons would fire simultaneously, creating an energy surge powerful enough to tear holes in reality itself. Fleet Admiral Vorthak realized what the humans were planning just moments before. Captain Jisu gave the firing command. He ordered an immediate retreat, but his massive fleet could not change direction quickly enough. The doom wall was trapped by its own size and momentum. Fire all weapons. Captain Jisu commanded. The four Galaxyrender beams converged at the center of the Keth formation, creating a dimensional storm that consumed hundreds of enemy ships in seconds. The proud doom wall was broken before the real battle could even begin. As reality warping energy spread through their defensive shields like fire through dry grass. Fleet Admiral Vorthak watched in horror as nearly half his fleet simply ceased to exist. The dimensional cascade had worked exactly as Dr. Hannah predicted, turning the Keth shields into conduits for reality warping destruction. The surviving ships fled in complete disorder. The battle was over in minutes, but the implications would echo across the galaxy for generations. Humanity had not just defeated the largest Keth fleet ever assembled. They had done it using the aliens' own technology against them in ways the Empire had never imagined possible. But Captain Jisu felt no celebration. Intelligence reports suggested that the Keth were preparing something even more desperate. They would rather destroy Earth completely than allow the dimensional weapons to be used against other parts of their empire. The next attack would not be aimed at conquest, but at total annihilation. Part 4. The Turning Tide. 3 weeks after the first battle, Captain Jisu stood in the command center watching Earth slowly heal. From 5 years of war, the planet still bore scars from Keth attacks, but for the first time since the invasion began, there was hope burning in human hearts across the world. Dr. Hannah had used every moment of those 3 weeks to build more Galaxyrender devices, working with teams of scientists and engineers who barely understood the technology they were assembling. The dimensional energy was complex and dangerous, but humanity was learning to master it. Through desperation and determination, we now have 4 operational Galaxyrender platforms, Hannah reported to the War Council. The devices are installed on hidden stations throughout the solar system, giving us coverage from multiple angles. The Keth will not be able to approach Earth without facing our reality warping weapons. Major Sung-hoon studied the defensive arrangements on his tactical display. The new weapons were positioned near Mars, Luna, and the asteroid belt, creating a defensive network that could protect Earth from attacks coming from any direction. Each Galaxyrender could erase entire fleets from existence. Intelligence reports suggested that the Keth Empire was preparing a massive counterattack using their most feared military formation. The Doom Wall was commanded by Fleet Admiral Vorthak himself and contained over 1,000 warships, including the Empire's largest and most powerful vessels. Lieutenant Colonel Yuna had spent 1 month after the destruction of the Doom Wall. The Keth Empire made a decision that shocked even their own military commanders. Instead of sending another fleet to conquer Earth, they decided to destroy the entire solar system to prevent the dimensional weapons from ever being used again. The plan was discovered when Communications Officer Boyang intercepted coded transmissions between Keth command centers scattered across the galaxy. The aliens were building something called a Star Killer device that could destabilize the nuclear fusion reactions inside the sun itself if succeed in destroying our star captain. Jisu said to the Emergency War Council, Earth will freeze to death within weeks and every human in the solar system will die. The Keth would rather commit genocide than risk losing more ships to our dimensional weapons. Dr. Hana studied the intercepted technical data about the Starkiller and felt sick to her stomach. The device was massive, requiring dozens of Keth ships to transport and operate, but once activated it would cause the sun to collapse into a black hole that would consume the entire Solar System. Intelligence Officer Minjae had managed to locate the Starkiller fleet through long-range sensors. The Keth ships were approaching from the direction of the outer planets, moving slowly and carefully to avoid detection by human monitoring stations. Their formation was unlike anything seen before. The enemy fleet consisted of over 200 specialized vessels designed specifically to transport and deploy the star-killing weapon. Most of the ships were enormous cargo haulers, protected by heavy escorts and supported by mobile defense platforms. Major Sung-hoon analyzed the tactical situation and realized that humanity faced an impossible challenge. The Starkiller fleet was positioned near the sun, where any mistake with the Galaxyrender weapons could trigger a solar explosion that would destroy Earth. Anyway, we cannot use our dimensional weapons at full power so close to the sun, he explained to Captain Jisoo. The energy discharge might destabilize the nuclear reactions we are trying to protect. If we miss our target or use too much power, we could accidentally cause the very disaster we are trying to prevent. Engineer Changmin had been studying the Starkiller technology and discovered that the Keth device worked by introducing exotic particles into the sun's core. These particles would disrupt the delicate balance of forces that kept the star stable, causing it to collapse under its own gravity. The process would take several hours to complete, giving the Keth fleet time to retreat to a safe distance before the sun died. But once the exotic particles were introduced into the solar core, nothing could stop the chain reaction that would destroy the entire system. Lieutenant Colonel Yuna proposed a desperate plan to board the Starkiller platform and disable it from the inside, but the weapon was too heavily defended and too far away for human ships to reach. The Keth had learned from their previous defeats and were taking no chances. Dr. Hana had been working on modifications to the Galaxyrender technology that might allow them to transport objects across interstellar distances instead of simply erasing them from existence. The dimensional energy could fold space on a massive scale, but the power requirements would be enormous. What if we could move the entire Keth fleet away from our solar system, she suggested to the stunned War Council. Instead of destroying their ships, we could transport them to the far side of the galaxy, where they would need centuries just to find their way back home. The idea was audacious beyond belief. Moving thousands of enemy ships across galactic distances would require more dimensional energy than humans had ever attempted to channel. The risks were incalculable, but the alternative was the death of everyone on Earth. Specialist Yunji ran calculations on the power requirements and discovered that the plan would need the combined output of every Galaxyrender device operating at maximum capacity. They would have to remove all safety limits and tap directly into the dimensional source without any restrictions. Technician Sunwoo began preparations to link all 4 Galaxyrender platforms into a single massive weapon system. The synchronization would have to be perfect because any mistake could tear holes in space time that might destroy the solar system faster than the Keth Starkiller. The work was incredibly dangerous because nobody really understood the fundamental nature of dimensional energy. They were attempting to manipulate forces that existed partially outside normal reality using technology reverse engineered from captured alien equipment. As the modifications proceeded, strange effects began appearing throughout the solar system. Space itself started to bend and warp around the Galaxyrender platforms, creating visual distortions that made navigation nearly impossible for both human and Keth ships. Navigator Jihoon reported that normal space-time was becoming unstable near each dimensional weapon. The fabric of reality was being stretched to its limits by the massive energy flows required for the galactic transportation plan. The Keth fleet continued its slow approach toward the sun, unaware that the humans were preparing something that would rewrite the rules of interstellar warfare. Fleet Admiral Vorthak was confident that this time nothing could stop him from completing his mission, but Dr. Hana had discovered something amazing about dimensional energy during her modifications. The power source existed in a realm where distance and time worked differently than in normal space. A ship could be moved across the galaxy as easily as across a solar system. The challenge was not distance, but precision. Moving the Keth fleet without accidentally transporting parts of the solar system required calculations so complex that human computers could barely handle them. One small error could send Earth itself spinning into the void. Chief engineer Hyun-woo supervised the final preparations as the Galaxyrender devices were linked into a single network. The combined weapon system now drew power equivalent to dozens of stars, all focused through 4 small dimensional platforms. Communications from across human space reported reality distortions as far away as the outer colonies. The dimensional energy was affecting space time throughout the entire solar system, creating effects that could be seen from neighboring star systems. Captain Jisoo stood in the command center watching the Keth fleet move closer to the sun and felt the weight of an impossible decision. The Starkiller device was almost in position, and soon it would be too late to stop the destruction of Earth. All Galaxyrender platforms report ready for maximum power discharge. Specialist Yoonji announced the dimensional energy levels are beyond our ability to measure accurately. We are about to attempt something that has never been done before in galactic history. The Keth ships reached their final positions around the sun and began deploying the Starkiller platform. The massive device unfolded like a metal flower, each petal containing exotic matter generators that would poison the solar core fleet. Admiral Vorthak opened a communication channel to Earth and delivered what he expected to be his final message to humanity. Your species chose to defy the Keth Empire, and now you will face the consequences. Your son will die, and your world will freeze. But he did not know that Captain Jisoo was about to give an order that would send his entire fleet on a journey across the galaxy. The dimensional weapons were charged and ready to attempt the most ambitious transportation in cosmic history. The fate of Earth hung in the balance as reality itself prepared to bend under the will of desperate humans. The final moment arrived when Fleet Admiral Vorthak activated the Starkiller device and exotic particles began streaming toward the sun. Captain Jisoo watched the readings from solar monitoring stations and knew that humanity had perhaps 30 minutes before the chain reaction became unstoppable. Dr. Hannah stood at the master control panel for the linked Galaxyrender network and felt the dimensional energy flowing through the combined system like liquid fire. The power levels were beyond anything ever achieved in galactic history, equivalent to the energy output of entire star clusters. All 4-dimensional weapons were now operating as a single massive device capable of manipulating space-time on a scale that would have terrified even the ancient race that first discovered dimensional energy. The fabric of reality was bending under forces that existed partially outside the normal universe. Specialist Yoonji monitored the energy flow and watched the readings climb higher and higher. Power levels are stable, but we are approaching the theoretical limits of what dimensional space can handle, she reported. If we push much further, we might tear permanent holes in reality. The plan was simple in concept but terrifyingly complex in execution. Instead of using the Galaxyrender weapons to destroy the Keth fleet, they would use dimensional energy to fold space around the enemy ships and transport them instantly to the Andromeda Galaxy. The distance was almost incomprehensible, over 2 million light-years away, but dimensional energy did not follow normal rules about space and time. The Keth fleet could be moved across intergalactic space as easily as across a solar system if the calculations were perfect. Engineer Chang Min had run the numbers dozens of times, and each calculation showed the same result. The combined Galaxyrender network had enough power to transport every Keth ship in the solar system, but the energy discharge would be visible from neighboring galaxies. Chief Engineer Hyun-woo coordinated the final preparations as technicians throughout the solar system made last-minute adjustments to the dimensional weapon network. One small error in synchronization could cause the weapons to interfere with each other and destroy the entire system. The Keth fleet continued deploying the Starkiller device, unaware that reality was about to be rewritten around them. Fleet Admiral Vorthak watched the exotic particle streams reach toward the sun and felt satisfaction that his mission would finally succeed, but 30 minutes was not enough time for the particles to complete their deadly work. The sun would begin showing signs of instability long before the chain reaction became irreversible. Captain Jisoo had to act before the solar core was permanently damaged, initiating dimensional fold sequence. She announced to the combined human fleet, all stations report ready for maximum power discharge. This is either going to save Earth or destroy everything. We hold dear. The 4 Galaxyrender platforms began drawing unprecedented amounts of dimensional energy from the source beyond normal spacetime. The power flow was so intense that space itself started glowing with aurora-like effects that could be seen with the naked eye. Reality distortions spread throughout the solar system as the dimensional weapons reached full power. Gravity fluctuated wildly, causing tidal effects on every planet, and moontime dilation fields appeared randomly, making some areas experience moments that lasted for hours. Lieutenant Colonel Yuna reported from the Mars station that the dimensional energy was creating visual effects that hurt to look at directly. Space around each Galaxyrender platform was folding and unfolding like origami made from the fabric of reality itself. The Keth ships suddenly detected the massive energy buildup, and Fleet Admiral Vorthak realized that the humans were attempting something beyond his understanding. His sensors showed power levels that should have been impossible for any species to generate or control. Emergency retreat. He ordered his fleet, but it was already too late. The dimensional fold was beginning, and space around the Keth ships was starting to bend in ways that made navigation impossible. Their engines could not function normally in the distorted space-time. Dr. Hana initiated the final sequence and felt the dimensional energy surge through the network. Like a tsunami of pure force, the power was so intense that her instruments could no longer measure it accurately. All she could do was trust in the calculations and hope. Captain Jisu watched through the viewing screen as space began folding around the entire Keth fleet. The enemy ships seemed to stretch and compress as dimensional forces grabbed them and prepared to hurl them across intergalactic distances. The visual effect was indescribable. Reality itself was being twisted into impossible shapes as the Galaxyrender network created a dimensional rift larger than Jupiter. The opening in spacetime glowed with colors that had no names and energies that existed beyond normal physics. Navigator Jihun tried to track the Keth ships as they were caught in the dimensional fold, but his instruments could not follow objects that were being moved outside normal spacetime. The enemy fleet was there one moment and simply gone the next. Dimensional rift collapsed with a sound like the universe screaming, but the Keth fleet had vanished completely. Over 10,000 enemy ships, including the massive Star Killer device, had been transported to the Andromeda Galaxy in a single instant. Communications Officer Boyoung confirmed that all Keth transmissions had ceased, and long-range sensors showed empty space where the enemy fleet had been floating moments before. The solar system was suddenly quiet after months of constant alien chatter. Dr. Hana checked the dimensional energy readings and discovered that the massive transportation had drained their connection to the dimensional source. The Galaxyrender weapons would need years to recharge and might never again reach such incredible power levels, but the victory came with an unexpected price. The dimensional manipulation had been detected by monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Every advanced civilization within 1,000 light-years had recorded energy signatures that challenged their understanding of physics. Technician Sunwoo intercepted communications from dozens of alien species as news of the dimensional transportation spread through galactic communication networks. Some civilizations expressed fear, while others showed curiosity about the species that could rewrite reality. The humans had proven something that would echo across the galaxy for generations. When pushed to the edge of extinction, they had not just fought back, but had developed technology that made the impossible seem routine. Earth was no longer a primitive world to be conquered. Major Sung-hoon analyzed the strategic implications as reports came in from across human space. Other alien civilizations were sending diplomatic missions to Earth. For the first time in history, humanity had become a power that could not be ignored or dismissed. The age of human expansion into the galaxy had begun, powered by dimensional technology that turned physics into suggestions rather than laws. The Galaxyrender had saved Earth, but more importantly, it had announced to the universe that humanity was ready to take its place among the stars. Captain Jisu stood on the observation deck of the space station and looked out at Earth floating peacefully in the void. The blue and green world that had nearly died was now the center of attention. For half the galaxy, the first Galaxyrender had accomplished its mission, but Dr. Hanna was already working on improvements to the dimensional technology. The next generation of weapons would be smaller and more efficient, allowing human ships to carry reality warping devices to the star's fleet. Admiral Vorthak and his ships would spend centuries trying to find their way back from the Andromeda Galaxy, and by the time they returned, they would find a very different universe. Human colonies would be spreading across the galaxy, protected by weapons that could erase entire fleets from existence. The Keth Empire still controlled thousands of worlds, but they had learned that humanity was no longer